I've always been drawn to the strange and the unexplainable. Whispers of ghost stories had always been a favorite part of my childhood, and Whispering Pine Cemetery was like something out of a campfire tale. Tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains, it had been abandoned for decades, its gravestones crumbling under moss and vines. Caleb, my ever-curious younger brother, shared my fascination, though his motivations were far less romantic. For him, it was all about the thrill, the adrenaline rush of creeping to forgotten places. We first heard about Whispering Pines from one of Caleb's friends, who claimed to have seen ghostly lights floating among the graves. Will-o'-the-wisps, they'd called them, though none of us really knew what that meant. But the more we talked about it, the more determined Caleb became to see for himself. And of course, I couldn't let him go alone. That's how we ended up at the cemetery one late October evening, flashlight beams cutting through the dense, misty air. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't just the absence of birds or rustling leaves. It was a heavy, unnatural stillness, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The trees, their gnarled branches like skeletal fingers, swayed without sound. Even Caleb, normally full of jokes, seemed subdued. "I don't get why people are so scared of cemeteries," Caleb muttered, kicking a stray stone. "It's just a bunch of rocks and dirt." "Maybe they're scared of what's underneath the rocks and dirt," I replied, glancing at a particularly weathered headstone. The name had long since eroded, leaving only faint impressions of letters. We wandered for a while, our conversation ebbing as the weight of the place settled on us. The moon was our only guide when Caleb suddenly grabbed my arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing ahead. At first, I saw nothing, but then, faint and flickering, a bluish light hovered above the ground, darting between the gravestones. It wasn't fire. It didn't behave like any light I'd ever seen. It danced, almost playfully, but something about it made my skin crawl. "Is that—" Caleb began, but he didn't finish. Before I could respond, a shadow moved near the far end of the cemetery. My heart jumped. It wasn't a light. This was something darker, more solid. A figure kneeling by a grave. "Probably some weirdo trying to scare us," Caleb said, his voice louder than it should have been. "Sure," I hissed, pulling him behind a tree. My instinct screamed at me to stay hidden, but Caleb, ever the skeptic, had other ideas. "Hey," he called, stepping into the open. "Nice try, buddy, but we're not falling for it." The figure didn't move. I followed reluctantly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. As we got closer, I noticed details that made my breath hitch. The figure was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, the kind you'd see in black and white photos. Tattered suspenders, a wide-brimmed hat. His shoulders sagged, his head bowed as if in prayer. "Sir," I ventured, my voice barely above a whisper. Slowly, the man turned to face us, and I stumbled back. His face was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes, they weren't quite human. They glimmered faintly, like the ghostly light we'd seen earlier. "Leave this place," he said, his voice low and resonant, like the hum of distant thunder. "We didn't mean any harm," I stammered, gripping Caleb's arm. "Leave," he repeated, rising to his feet. Though he didn't seem hostile, an undeniable weight pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. Before we could react, the atmosphere shifted. A cold wind swept through the cemetery, carrying with a sound I'll never forget. A low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Get behind me," the man ordered, his tone urgent. "What's going on?" Caleb asked, his bravado melting into fear. Another shadow emerged, this one larger and more menacing. Its form was indistinct, constantly shifting, but its presence was suffocating. It moved toward us with deliberate malice. I froze, unable to look away as the creature lunged. But before it could reach us, the man stepped forward, raising a hand. A blinding light erupted from his palm, forcing the shadow to recoil. It hissed and writhed before vanishing into the darkness. The man turned back to us, his expression weary but kind. "You must respect the dead," he said. "This place is not a playground." "Who are you?" I managed to ask. He hesitated, his form flickering like a dying flame. "I am Elias. I once tended to this place, long ago, It is my duty to protect it still. But why? Caleb began, but Elias raised a hand to silence him. There are forces here older than you can imagine. Leave now and do not return. Not all spirits are as forgiving as I. Before he could say anything more, Elias began to fade. His final words lingered in the air like an echo. Remember, respect the dead, and preserve the sanctity of this ground. Caleb, and I didn't need to be told twice. We ran, stumbling over roots and stones, until we burst out of the cemetery and into the safety of the forest beyond. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that something followed us out that night. Caleb insists it's my imagination, but every so often, I catch him glancing over his shoulder, his carefree demeanor cracking just a little. We haven't been back to Whispering Pines. We don't talk about Elias or the shadow or the warning, but every time I see a graveyard, I remember his words. Some stories are best left untold, and some places, no matter how tempting, are better left undisturbed. I still remember the cool, damp air that clung to my skin as I walked through the overgrown cemetery. The path leading to my grandmother's grave was little more than a faint indentation in the tall grass, and the occasional crunch of dried leaves underfoot seemed far too loud in the otherwise silent evening. I had always been told to avoid this place after dark, but today marked the 3rd anniversary of Nana's passing, and I couldn't let it go unobserved. The village had long since been abandoned, its residents scattered to more prosperous towns and cities. Yet, the cemetery remained, a patchwork of forgotten lives memorialized in stone, shrouded by gnarled trees and thick brambles. As I approached my grandmother's grave, the sense of isolation grew heavier, pressing against my chest like an unseen weight. Nana had been my anchor in life, her presence a comforting constant amidst the chaos of my parents' endless work schedules and the relentless tide of school and responsibilities. Her laughter was my safe harbor, her wisdom my compass. Tending to her grave was my way of holding on to the last fragile thread of connection. I knelt down and brushed away the leaves that had gathered over her headstone. Nana, I whispered, the lump in my throat making my voice tremble. I miss you. A gust of wind stirred the air, rustling the branches above and sending a cascade of brittle leaves swirling around me. At first, I thought nothing of it, just nature's way of answering my words. But then, faint and indistinct, I heard it, a whisper. Clara? I froze, my breath catching in my chest. The sound was so soft, so delicate, that I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. Yet, there it was again, threading its way through the stillness of the graveyard. Clara? The voice was eerily familiar, but I couldn't place it. It was neither Nana's voice nor anyone I could recall, and it carried a strange mix of urgency and sorrow that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Who's there? I called out, my voice louder than I intended. My words echoed faintly, swallowed by the trees. No answer came, but the whispering continued, beckoning me deeper into the graveyard. Despite the fear clawing the edges of my mind, a peculiar compulsion took hold of me. I rose to my feet, my grandmother's grave momentarily forgotten, as I stepped cautiously among the crooked tombstones. The whispering grew more insistent, drawing me toward the far end of the cemetery, where the trees grew denser and the light struggled to penetrate. Clara, you must listen. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, wrapping around me like an invisible thread. My foot caught on a root, and I stumbled, my hands grazing against the cold, rough surface of a moss-covered gravestone. I glanced around, my heart hammering in my chest. Who was calling me, and why? As I pushed forward, a new sensation washed over me. It was as if the air itself had changed, thicker, heavier, almost oppressive. The whispering had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to amplify the pounding of my heart. Then I saw it. Nestled amidst the shadows of the overgrown trees stood a crumbling mausoleum, its stone facade cracked and weathered with age. The door hung ajar, revealing only darkness within. Something about the structure filled me with a deep unease, as though it didn't belong here, or perhaps I didn't belong near it. Clara, stay away. The whisper was louder now, almost a plea, and I spun around, desperate to find its source. That's when I saw him, a figure emerging from the gloom, his form shimmering faintly as though made of mist. He was an elderly man, dressed in clothes that looked decades out of date, his eyes kind but filled with profound sadness. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. "A guardian," he replied, his tone gentle but firm. "I've watched over this place for many years, even after my time here ended. You shouldn't be here, child." "I was visiting my grandmother," I said, taking a hesitant step back. "And then, I heard you." He nodded, his expression grave. "I called to you because danger lies ahead. That mausoleum," he gestured toward the decaying structure. "It is unstable, ready to collapse at the slightest disturbance. Beneath it lies a network of old tunnels, forgotten and treacherous. If it falls, it could take you or anyone else with it." The weight of his words settled heavily on my shoulders. I glanced at the mausoleum, its fractured stones seeming to teeter precariously even in the still air. "What should I do?" I asked. "Warn them," he said simply. "Tell those who can act. They must seal this place, make it safe. My purpose here is nearly done, but you have the power to ensure no harm comes from this." I nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "I'll tell someone. I promise." The man's face softened, and he gave me a small, weary smile. "Thank you, Clara. Your kindness will not be forgotten." As he spoke, his form began to fade, the mist that made up his body dissipating into the air. Within moments, he was gone, leaving me alone in the shadowed graveyard. The next morning, I told my parents everything. Though they were skeptical at first, they agreed to contact the local authorities. Engineers arrived a few days later to assess the site, and their findings confirmed the ghostly groundskeeper's warning. The mausoleum was indeed on the brink of collapse, and the unstable tunnels beneath posed a serious threat. The area was cordoned off, and efforts were made to secure the structure and prevent future accidents. Though I never saw the spirit again, I often thought him whenever I visited the cemetery. His warning had saved not only me, but potentially countless others. It was as if Nana herself had sent him to protect me, a final act of love from beyond the grave. Even now, years later, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for that whisper in the night. It reminded me that care and protection can take many forms, sometimes unseen but always present. And in the quiet moments, as I stand before my grandmother's grave, I swear I can still hear the faintest echo of his voice, a whisper carried on the wind, reminding me that we are never truly alone.